UFC history, let's count down the 10 fastest knockouts that left fans speechless and fighters stunned. The UFC has seen its fair share of unforgettable knockouts, but some stand out for their speed and pure shock factor. We're talking about fights that were over in seconds. Moments that left fans around the world blinking and asking, wait, is it over already? Whether it's a perfectly placed punch, a surprise kick, or a knee that connects at the exact right time, these knockouts remind us of the raw power and unpredictability of the sport. So if you're ready for some high adrenaline action and want to relive the fastest finishes in UFC history, stick around. These moments will have you on the edge of your seat and maybe checking the clock to believe how fast they really happened. All the information and highlights featured in this video are sourced directly from the official Give Me Sport website, providing accurate and up-to-date details on the fastest knockouts in UFC history. UFC fans will always remember the grueling back-and-forth battles or the technical chess matches that go the distance, but what about the ones that happen so quickly that a replay is often needed in order to understand what unfolded? What they lack in length, these fast fights make up for in pure high-octane energy. Over the course of the UFC's 30-year history, there have been some fast finishes that have gone under the radar. Take your time, unlike these fighters, and enjoy the 10 fastest knockouts in UFC history. Number 10, Gray Maynard vs. Joe Veers. Event UFC Fight Night 11. Result knockout via punches. Length 9 seconds. Gray Maynard used his fight against Joe Veers to get the taste of his double knockout no contest fight from his UFC debut out of his mouth by performing one of the fastest knockouts in UFC history. Maynard has been known to come out of the gates hot with big-time power, especially for the lightweight division. After a very short feeling-out process with several feints, Maynard unleashed a lead left hook on the jaw of Veers that sent him falling back into the fence. The statement win for Maynard set him on one of the greatest winning streaks in the division's history that eventually earned him a title shot against UFC champion Frankie Edgar in what was one of the greatest fights in history. Number 9, Leon Edwards vs. Seth Budzinski. Event UFC Fight Night 64. Result knockout via punches. Length 8 seconds. Before becoming a respectable UFC welterweight champion, Leon Edwards was finding his way in a shark tank of a division. Following his UFC debut where he lost a split decision fight, Edwards decided he would not leave the fight in the judges' hands again and came out versus Seth Budzinski looking to make a statement. Edwards started the fight on his back foot by circling to his left a few times, but once Budzinski settled in his pursuit, Edwards pawed with his right and then unleashed a scorching left that floored his opponent and secured a historic knockout. Number 8, Makwan Amirkhani vs. Andy Ogle. Event UFC on Fox. 14. Result knockout via flying knee and punches. Length 8 seconds. Throughout his 8 years in the UFC, Makwan Amirkhani has been involved in highly entertaining fights, and his UFC debut set the tone for his career when he quickly dismantled his opponent Andy Ogle. Amirkhani flew across the cage with his flying knee attack to stop Ogle's forward progress and then closed the show with a precise uppercut and a flurry of punches. Amirkhani approached this technique like an Olympic long jumper, similar to the fastest knockout on this list. Coincidentally, the aforementioned knockouts listed were very early in the fighter's career. Maybe there's something to a fighter wanting to make an early impression. Years later, Amirkhani is trying to find that same magic that started his UFC career. Number 7, James Irvin vs. Houston Alexander. Event UFC Fight Night 13. Result knockout via punches. Length 8 seconds. James Irvin knocking out Houston Alexander in the blink of an eye was a big meeting for the two ascending light heavyweights. Both fighters were known for their intimidating power, but a finish in under 10 seconds was totally unexpected. Incredibly, this fight could have ended sooner because half of the fight was showing respect to one another with touching gloves. Irvin stunned Alexander with an unexpected Superman punch and then used walloping ground and pound before the referee stepped in. Irvin used this impressive victory to get propelled into a huge fight against one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time, Anderson Silva. Number 6, Terrence McKinney vs. Matt Frevola. Event UFC 263. Result, knockout via punches. Length, 7 seconds. Another fighter trying to forge their way in the UFC was Terrence McKinney, taking on Matt Frevola in his UFC debut. Being on a pay-per-view card raises the level of adrenaline of the fighters, and McKinney used those nerves to his advantage by zoning in and landing a 1-2 combination on Frevola. McKinney swarmed at the knockdown with hammer fists, which sealed the fight. Crazy enough, McKinney suffered more damage in his post-fight celebration than in the actual fight. It's been an up-and-down battle for the lightweight, but he is on a mini-win streak with both wins coming via knockout. Number 5. Ryan Jimmo vs. Anthony Parash. Event UFC 149. Result, knockout via punches. Length, 7 seconds. You can't make this up, as once again we have a fighter making their UFC debut in a record-setting way. Ryan Jimmo's 7-second knockout of Anthony Parash came after the first punch was thrown. Jimmo quickly claimed cage generalship by marching forward after the respectful glove touch. After tracking down Parash, Jimmo uncorked a powerful overhand right to flatten his opponent. Needless to say, the Canadian crowd erupted at the amazing result. His fantastic performance at UFC 149 is an accomplishment he can truly hang his hat on. Number 4. Chan Sung Jung vs. Mark Hominick. Event UFC 140. Result, knockout via punches. Length, 7 seconds. An eventual featherweight title challenger, Mark Hominick, is the only losing fighter on this list who actually threw the first strike. Beautifully, Chan Sung Jung, aka the Korean Zombie, dodged his opponent's looping attack and threw a perfectly timed counterpunch down the pipe to put an immediate halt to Hominick's forward progress. Zombie threw a few ground and pound punches to finalize the fight, but most of the heavy lifting was already done. The play-by-play commentator Mike Goldberg couldn't even finish his ad read before the fight was waved off, similarly to the fastest knockout on this list. This win for Jung was one of 3 consecutive finishes for the Korean fighter that earned him a title fight against one of the greatest 145-pounders in history, Jose Aldo. Number 3. Todd Duffy vs. Tim Hague. Event UFC 102. Result, knockout via punches. Length, 7 seconds. Like the Irvin Alexander fight, both Todd Duffy and Tim Hague loaded up to see who could find the target first, like an old Western movie. But timing is everything, and Duffy threw a sharp jab that beat Hague's labored hook. The stiff jab was the beginning of the end. Duffy swiftly leaped on Hague with accurate ground and pound punches to assure there was no doubt over the result. Another UFC debut ended in a sensational way, as Duffy seemed ready to make some noise in the heavyweight division. Duffy finished his UFC career with a record of 3-2, but his first win was surely a memorable one. Number 2. Duane Ludwig vs. Jonathan Goulet. Event UFC Fight Night 3. Result, knockout via punches. Length, 6 seconds. Almost identical to the Edwards-Basinski fight, Duane Ludwig's lightning-fast disposal of Jonathan Goulet was a clean countercross with no follow-up punches needed. Like many other victors in this collection of fast finishers, Ludwig made a statement in his very first UFC fight. For whatever reason, Ludwig didn't fight in the UFC for 4 years following this spectacular win. Though he had a tough go in the UFC upon his return, this knockout was the fastest in UFC history for more than 13 years. Number 1. Jorge Masvidal vs. Ben Askren. Event UFC 239. Result, knockout via flying knee and punches. Length, 5 seconds. A knockout that needs no introduction is Jorge Masvidal's incredible flying knee in his 2019 bout against the trash-talking Ben Askren. It's widely known as the resurrection year for Masvidal, who took time off to sort things out, but bounced back in a big way with 3 consecutive finishes, including this wild KO. People have said fights and is a superstar. Wow, UFC fans, what an electrifying journey through the fastest knockouts in UFC history. From Gray Maynard's lightning-quick victory to the unforgettable Jorge Masvidal's flying knee, these moments remind us why we love this sport so much. Anything can happen in just seconds. We've revisited some of the most heart-stopping, jaw-dropping finishes that have not only shaped careers, but have also etched themselves into the annals of UFC lore. And remember, the thrill doesn't stop here. There are always more breathtaking knockouts and awe-inspiring fighters on the rise, waiting to make their mark in the UFC. So make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe, stay tuned, and keep your eyes peeled for more high-octane UFC action coming your way.